Welcome, everybody. My name is Ross King, and I'm a professor in the Department of Asian Studies and also serve as director of the Center for Korean Research. So welcome to our third seminar of the new year. I also want to acknowledge that the Center for Korean Research and the Institute of Asian Research that houses it are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. So before I introduce the speaker, a couple announcements. As per usual, our next talk is on Friday, the 26th of this month, February 26th, Friday, 5 p.m. And keeping with February as Fashion Month, that will be Minji Kim talking about fashion history in Korea as a field of study. So this is a good, I guess, warm up to that topic today. And then the next one so far that we have scheduled for March is on the 19th. And that's Emmanuel Kim, who is a professor at George Washington University, who writes about North Korean literature. And the title of his talk is "A Good Wife is Hard to Find: Shifts in the Representation of Women in North Korean Literature." And then we have another talk so far scheduled in April by Cedar Bao Seiji on K-pop related themes. And I hope to schedule perhaps one more either in March or April. So just stay tuned and we'll keep you informed. So you've heard the announcement just now that this talk is going to be recorded. If you don't want, even if you do turn your camera on, in theory, you won't be in the video, you won't be on the recording. It's just the hosts that I think that show up. But just be warned that that's what's happening. We're going to be putting it on our YouTube channel, and I assume that Professor Pyun is okay with that. I think we checked that with you, right? Thank you so much. So then let me introduce our speaker. So Professor Kyunghee Pyun is an associate professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology in the SUNY system. She did her BA in art history at Seoul National University, and then MA and PhD in the same field at the Institute of Fine Arts, NYU. And I sort of did my usual snooping online to find out more about her, and it's really interesting. She, first of all, Professor Pyun teaches a really wide range of interesting looking courses on Western art and civilization, on East Asian art and civilization, Asian American art and design, art in New York, art and civilization of India, Silk Road, and of course, Korean art, and very active in digital humanities projects and online global learning projects. A couple of recent publications, just most, it's too many to really go through, but just this year, I think, that are either in press or just about to come out. Two edited volumes, one on American art from Asia, artistic praxis and theoretical divergence, co-edited with Michelle Lim, and then another volume, Interpreting Modernism in Korean Art, Fluidity and Fragmentation, with Rutledge, and that's with Woo Jung-ah. A really interesting article last year called Transformation of Monastic Habits, Student Uniforms for Christian Schools, which I'm assuming has some connection to today's talk. And then going back a couple more years, because one of the other sort of specialties of hers is medieval European art. And I thought, what's the connection? And then sure enough, 2016, portraying monks in illuminated service books in the 14th century. So there, it all sort of, I think, is connected. So today's talk, the title is Impression Management of School Uniform Culture in Korea from Colonial Modernity to the New Korean Wave. Thank you so much, Professor Pyun, for sharing time with us, and the floor is yours. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor King. You did a lot of research about me. Introduction was quite pleasant. And then I also want to thank Yeonju for facilitating this event. And I also want to thank Professor Millie Creighton, who introduced me to Center for Korean Research. And I meet a lot of people in the screen. I communicated with them for many months, but never met them. in person. So it's a great pleasure. So welcome everybody. It is a wonderful community at University of British Columbia. So let me share my slide with you. Okay. So do you know the word uniformed officers? I want you to read some of the descriptions of images on the bottom, and I'm going to move my on the top part. As opposed to detectives in regular clothes, police officers appear in uniforms. Assaulting uniformed officers is a great offense in the criminal system. Uniformed officers are symbols of authority coming from the public administration. A dress policy of uniforms for official business employees was to ensure looking effective and orderly. In similar views, we encountered uniformed officers in security and protection. Fred Wilson, American artist, his work Guarded View, hold on, I have one more, Guarded View, shows 4 museum guards as headless mannequins in the uniforms of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Jewish Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Whitney Museum of American Art. This was shown at Whitney Museum of American Art's Black Male Representations of Masculinity in Contemporary American Art, a landmark exhibition organized by curator Delma Gordon in 1994. The body of black male officers, usually considered unruly or dangerous, so much so that we as audiences have a guarded view of, is depicted in a nice, well-pressed security officer's uniform. Although meticulously and sharply dressed, one can see that these are outfits for museum guards, not of actual authority of law and order. In this particular context, Wilson used a headless mannequins to denote anonymity, could be anybody, of an African-American museum guard, while criminal montage of wanted would zoom in on the face. As you can reflect on your own visit to a museum, you don't want to remember individual faces of a museum guard. You only remember that remember that a uniformed body was there to protect artworks from viewers. In this talk, I interpret various ways of managing one's social dignity in school uniform culture in South Korea. Using sociologist Irving Goffman's theory of impression management, the paper explores how students in Korea have interacted with other students, authorities, and their communities. Applying the sociological methodologies of impression management, this paper analyzes process and meaning in mundane interaction of students dressed in school uniforms. It is argued that the performance in the process of accepting, resisting, and consuming sartorial regulations of a school uniform community existed regardless of the mental state of the individual. Standardization of daily dresses have much impact on the formation and the performance of one's identity. Children of 9 to 10 years old in a vintage school class photo taken around 1910 in Britain have a sort of a uniform or at least dress code. Girls put on a pinafore apron, similar to a jumper dress, while boys put on a Sunday best. Some wore a suit and tie, some wore shirt collar jackets. One's hair, facial expression, standing posture, and gaze are all signs or cues for observers to their degree of conformity, ideal behavior, and perhaps civic mindedness. I posit that subtle expressions of alterations or styling of uniforms are interpreted with care and nuance by others. Irving Goffman noted that people present or cultivate face, that's his term, face, which is the quote, positive social value a person effectively claims for himself or herself by the line others assume he has taken during a particular contact, unquote. He also emphasized that individuals are able to modify or alter the meanings and symbols that they use in action and interaction on the basis of their interpretation of the situation. When a school decided their school uniform system, the group agreed on symbols and meanings such as school badges, logos, colors, or designs of clothing. Symbols and meanings stem from meaningful association with a founder or religious orders, historical sites, or geographic locations, or historical event of the foundation. So this is a movie poster of a popular novel by Lee Mun-yeol called Our Twisted Hero, published in 1987. At a casual glance, students look alike in the same style of uniforms with others. Individuals express themselves in various modes of showing a wrong face or no face. In the context of school uniforms in East Asia, most students maintained that they were in face. He responds with feelings of confidence and assurance by exuding feelings of security and conformity as expected of him by others, mainly authorities. Some students may be said to be chosen to be in wrong face. Some may found to be out of phase when they found themselves out of touch with the situation. In serious occasion, a student may go very far to save his face. With the social changes and political pressures imposed by others or by central authorities, people in East Asia have experienced impression management in face-to-face interactions among fellow students, teachers, administrators within their school community. This management was also extended to a local community where 2 to 3 schools share a neighborhood or meet occasionally for tournaments and competitions. So if you know the story of our twisted hero, Byung-tae, here, the one with white color, he transferred from Seoul, nice boy. And then he meet his arch-enemy, Seok-tae, like that is the hero of the the main character of the movie, The Twisted Hero. And when you see their uniforms, it's the same school. It's the same school, and it's another scene, but the Byung-tae is usually in trouble because he's a new kid to a new school in the countryside, and all the other kids are listening to the Seok-tae, like over here. But if you see the clothes, it's right after the war. It's like a 1950s in the countryside. Most students are all boys. They are about 5th grade or so. He spent 2 years there. And if you know the novel, you will see the context of it. But supposedly they are in the same uniforms. But the reason I chose this is what I mean by impression management. Like depending on their household incomes or like their number of siblings, their clothes are, in a way, it's a uniform, like it should be all the same, but it's not all the same. And Byung-tae, for example, his father is a government employee and high position, so sort of a stand out with that white pressed color and shiny new buttons, while others have a little, run down clothes. Anyhow, but I am not analyzing the movie. I am just giving you an idea of what is going to be. So going back to our twisted hero, Byung-tae is a new kid from Seoul and sort of one who owns a socioeconomic status. It was in the late 1950s when Byung-tae's father got a new assignment in this region as a 공무원, like a government employee or civil officer. Byung-tae is shocked at this countryside school peer culture. 5th grade students revered and feared Seok-tae, our twisted hero, as much as teacher. The story itself is about corruption and power struggle of a political arena or of any community. Readers of the late 80s were easily reminded of Korean military dictatorship of the previous decades. In the movie version, you can recognize various degrees of personal care and household income in uniformed students at a countryside elementary school. attending elementary school, even though considered obligatory, required education for all citizens, even though it was education for all the citizens, but still it was a privilege in the 1950s. Some have a better outfits than others. All uniforms should be in the same design, but one can recognize various degrees of black hues or mismatching buttons. By using connotations of symbols by Roland Barthes and the impression management of Irving Goffman, I want to challenge a hypothesis that social influence has significant impact on our beliefs or behaviors, making us more similar to those of others around us. I posit that outcome of normative social influence involving school uniform policy often represents superficial public compliance rather than private acceptance, fundamental change in behavior and opinion. According to Goffman, individuals interact with others to project certain impressions on the audience in social encounters. Though students look alike in the identical uniforms, they employ a repertoire of maneuvers in order to maintain individuality. So in a similar vein, this is a scene from a 2004 movie called Once Upon a Time in High School. I move this a little bit here. So do you see the 말죽거리 잔혹사? I don't know whether you watched this movie. Here, the Hyun-soo is again a new kid transferred to a high school in 1978. People say that is a Sangmun High School in Seochodong. That was actually the original basis. By learning Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, Hyun-soo fights against the school bullies and finds his masculinity. So these boys in the front of the classroom. So these are a group of bad students or school bullies. So what I want to try to read is, again, it's the same school uniforms. And they also under the subject, they are subject to hair, like style regulations as well. But then within the classroom, they all recognize who's who. And they also give impressions on each other, what kind of kid they are. So obviously, these kids are bullies, and they usually open their buttons, one or two. They intentionally want to exude those kind of images that they are not really compliant. Anyhow, within the East Asian context of school uniform policy, students, administrators, and parents all invest their value system into the cultural capital of elite education and high-level academic accomplishments. Pierre Bourdieu emphasized the importance of la distinction in the intricate network of cultural capital. Culture is process and a product developed through the play of agency, mass, and authority. To understand the elite nature of school uniforms in its original context, we will look at the development of modernized school uniforms from the early 20th century. Let me move this up. Okay. The modernization in the 1870s prompted the government of Korea and Japan to adopt Western clothes for diplomatic and political reasons. Official uniforms in Japan or in the Korean Empire were all in the Western style. Police uniforms, military uniforms, legal officers, medical professionals, postal workers, and students all wore uniforms to reveal the wearer's occupation in new urban public space. In East Asia, modernized schools adopted a policy of westernized uniform on school-age children and young adults. Educational activities in modernized schools in East Asia are combinations of intellectual and physical enrichment. The evolution of school uniforms in Korea was equivalent to that of Japan. In 1895, the Korea Empire promulgated the dress regulation for civil and military officers and other governmental employees. After the Korean Empire was annexed to Japan, girls' schools had a hybrid fashion of hanbok style school uniforms as well as Western style suits. Modernized school uniforms in East Asia saw little change since 1870s. So these are probably 1970s example from the National Folk Museum. For boys, gakuran is the name of this type, was the name for an ensemble composed of jacket and trousers. A black jacket has 5 buttons with a high collar called tsumeeri, I mean, in Japanese words, because the prototype comes from Japan. And then gakuran, like a gaku is a school, and the ran refers to the Netherlands in the Edo periods. So thus, the word gakuran refers to Western style fashion. The original model of the present day gakuran uniform was first established in 1886 for the students of Tokyo University. The prototype of 5 buttons and a high collar, like this is a close-up, like it's always, and then sometimes you have a more pockets. So the prototype of 5 buttons and a high collar is believed to have come from the Waffenfrack, Prussian military uniforms around the 1843. It's not from the 1843, but if you look at the portraiture of Edward VII, 1902, different color, but you can see the same structure of the military uniform. So in the early 20th century, tailor-made school uniforms were expensive. As you see, Kim Kyo-jun's portraiture photo, the boy grew out of his uniform with shortened sleeves. He could have used the hands-on uniforms from older siblings. This is again at the National Museum, but so the same structure, but so it started with a long one, but as you repeat year after year, it gets a little bit shorter, but then people don't order a new school uniforms yet, right? Because you will go to high school or you go to a different school, so that they will get a new one, big one, and then you wear another 3-4 years. So Song Seok-ha's portrait photo is perhaps from the early 20s, when he graduated from Busan Commercial High School in 1922 and about to start Tokyo College of Commerce. He's dressed in dark color, well-tailored uniform, perfectly fitting his body. He is the one who founded the National Folk Museum. The original National Folk Museum. So his family was very wealthy in Ulsan area, and his family photos, all of them have a very like a sharply dressed members in there. So another most common type of school uniform is a sailor suit, composed of a flat color with striped borders. In East Asia, sailor suits were given to girls, while boys wore on army uniform-based school uniforms. The prototype of this suit was found in the Royal Navy of Britain in the 19th century. Royal Navy sailor suit persisted in the 20th century as a children's clothing, especially for boys. In Edwardian Britain, gender conformity was instilled in distinctive dress types of navy suits for boys and pinafores for girls. However, in Japan, a Royal Navy sailor suit became a standard for girls, while young boys and adolescent male students adopted a high-color military uniform. Sailor suits, predominantly in black color, were ubiquitously found in Japanese schoolgirl uniforms from the 1890s to the present day. Korean schools, however, utilized the modernized hanbok school uniforms for girls in the beginning. Mrs. Scranton, who founded Ihwa School in 1886, originally designed red hanbok ensemble made of Russian cotton textiles, so that students were called Hongdeungi, like because they wear the red clothes. So that's the original one. In 1911, American missionaries and teachers at Ewha, A.J. Walter and O.F. Pai, designed a vest attached to the hanbok skirt to facilitate physical education class. In the 1920s, many women's magazines carried sewing patterns for this type of modernized hanbok and other school uniforms. However, Japanese-style sailor suit became more prevalent from 1930s, and Ewha briefly adopted this in 1930s, but you will see more examples of sailor suit for schoolgirls. So let's stop chronological development of school uniforms and think about impression management. In Japan, school uniforms were called seifuku, while Korean people call the same style gyobok. In Korean, and then during the cultural rule, bunka seiji, following the March 1st independence movement in 1919, Japan created an image of a benevolent empire, allowing newspapers and magazines in Korean languages, as well as giving permissions to Korean-initiated schools. 1930s, Japan probably thought that annexation was so well implemented that colonial citizens of Korea should look like and act like Japanese citizens. Looking like and acting like Japanese citizens in fluent Japanese may have been important in advancing their careers and personal ambitions. The Government General of Japan exercised an intricate system of identifying talent, rewarding those loyal to its regime. In a school community, observation of school regulations was a foremost indicator of success and even survival. Binary perspectives of Japan and Korea during the colonial period, Japan as the civilized and Korea as the indigenous and the exotic, that idea prevailed in academic writings and popular journalism. Imamura Tomo, for example, came to Korea as a police chief in 1910. He wrote a book entitled Chosen Fujokushu, Collection of Joseon Customs. As one can imagine, the images of 풍속 or local customs in which you see peasants or entertainers in their exotic environment engaged with folkloric activities, those images were mass produced with the development of printing technology in the 1920s. Against this colonial manipulation, keeping excellent hygiene, looking impeccably smart, and putting effort into garment care were part of necessities to survive as colonial elite. So I show you two images, two group photos. One, the one you are looking at now, is from Osaka Meisei Gakuen High School, taken in the 1920s. And these were originally, the religious school foundation with the French missionaries. And then the second one is this. You can hardly tell which is taken in Japan and which is taken in Korea. By dressing students in Japanese style school uniforms, military uniforms, or court uniforms, the citizens in Japanese colonies again acted like, spoke like, and almost thought like the Japanese colonizers. That was the goal of Japanese education system. At least this is expected outcome of uniform policy and conformity. In the photograph of 1944, one can see a common school building, a front row of teachers, parents, local officials in kimonos. They are in modernized suits or sometimes wartime uniforms. This could be a school community in Osaka, Busan, or in Manchuria. In the propaganda posters and stamp designs of Manchukuo, puppet regime to disguise the Japanese ambition to colonize the entire China or Pan-Asia, girls of 5 communities, each dressed in an ethnic robe of Korea, Japan, China, Manchuria, and Russia, are praised for their harmony and unity in singing and dancing. One should not forget that impression management in school uniform policy carries colonial mimicry of imperialism to instill the spirit of colonizers in the colonized and to internalize the imperial ambition as their own. School uniforms is part of a larger gambit of control and conformity in the political arena of imperialism. Official suits were designed for government officials in Japan, officials in Japan and Korea, while workers in public and private companies wore workers' uniforms. In the 1940s, students wore wartime uniforms. So this was my one example of that Song Seok-ha's family. So the Song Seok-ha himself is seated in the middle, and then this is his younger brother, and then this is younger sister, and then this well-dressed boy is Song Seok-ha's son. So impeccably dressed people. And if we don't know, like, for other labels, they are like images of a successful family in Japan, in Korea, or any other colonies of Japan. Gorgeous sailor uniforms, and this is really well-fitting clothes. So he probably started school just now, and then the clothes will get smaller. But who knows? Maybe they ordered new clothes one every year. They are so wealthy at the time. Anyhow, so in the 1940s, students wore wartime work uniforms. So as shown in the snapshot of Gyeongnam Girls High School, so this is from their album, Gyeongnam High School, Gyeongnam Girls High School in Busan. Girls' sailor suit skirt was replaced, like the 1940s, replaced with baggy trousers. During the Second Sino-Japanese War in Manchuria, the Japanese government general came up with a statute called Citizens Protecting the Nation Through Labor. And it encouraged or required men to wear military uniform style suits, while women in rural villages dress themselves in bloomer style work trousers called mompe. What distinguishes mompe in the 1930s from previous hakama-based activity trousers are the narrow hems tight around their ankles. So, and then both Japanese and Korean women wore this during the war period. So during the war time, men were introduced to 국민복, as you can see here, produced in dark colors, if not military green, and worn by male students and adults alike. That is not much different from the Zhongshan suit. The Zhongshan suit, which created for Sun Yat-sen during his fight against the Japanese imperial regime. In China, both the Communist Party and the Nationalist Party showed their plebeian camaraderie and frugality in the form of a Zhongshan suit. The difference between this and then Gakuran style uniform would be 5 golden buttons on the school uniforms. 국민복 fast disappeared in South Korea after 1945, while mompe continued to be worn by older women in rural areas throughout the 20th century. In a manufacturing neighborhood called Gongdan, on the outskirts of a city, younger women instead sported a company logo, the worker's jacket, not so much different from the 국민복 in the 70s. So now I'm coming to the end of a conclusion. So let me see, we are Okay, so there are a lot of images, but not a lot of text. So considering the doomed military connotation of school uniform design from the 19th century imperialism, one should imagine a new world after the independence. However, as scholars of colonialism are well aware, the imperial regime's colonial administration remained steadfast. High schools and universities were still elite institutions, not accessible to ordinary citizens. Schools founded during the annexation wanted to continue their tradition. From 1945 to 1968, middle schools and high schools in Korea kept the uniform policy, but designed their own school uniforms, hats, logos, shoes, or bags. This is because each school gave its own entrance exam based on a hierarchical order of schools based on academic rigor. Anyone could recognize each school's identity by school symbols, uniform designs, or colors. By looking at school uniforms, one could discern an elite school from a third-tier school or a vocational training school. These are examples of visual symbols. This is a Seoul National University belt, or the hat. This is Osan Middle School, and it has a label inside. People usually buy a hat that fits you. And then there are more. This one is a Jail High School. So to us, it looks basically the basic shape is the same, but the but the insignia on top of the head is slightly different. And then people read those signs very carefully. So you can wear a tight hat versus a bigger hat. Or buttons are well polished and neatly sewn. Someone carries the proud logo of Kyunghee, like in a Kyunghee High School. As you can note in the head insignia, these visual prompts are really subtle. But within your own neighborhood or in the town, students eventually obtain the learned behavior and recognize personal, communal, or privileged identity. In memoirs by people who attended those elite schools, there are many accounts of teachers emphasizing the pride and the spirit of each community in morning meetings, assemblies, or field trips. Speaking of, so these are the more sets. So do you see this letter says high school, that the Chinese character go, and this looks almost the same, but the upper one is Kyunghee High School. Then the one below is Hongseong High School. Not that people should be ashamed by attending Hongseong, but what I'm saying is it is subtle, but you are in the system, you recognize those things. And then speaking of field trips, speaking of the field trips, I want to show you 1, 2, 3. So this is one. And then I have the second one. And then there is a third one. So going back here, speaking of field trips, students represent their school image outside the classrooms. Some students behave differently within school and outside a school community. Field trips organized by school administration are official part of school life. In the photograph of girls at an art exhibition, students stand in a respectful manner, almost impeccable. Although casual onlookers do not distinguish one after another, they all look alike, right? Again, because they have a hair regulation. Do not distinguish one after another. Their peers certainly recognize who they are if they spent enough time in the same classroom. In the second photograph, their socks are different. Do you note? Their socks are a little bit different. So there are little clues. Again, you wear sleeves a lot longer, then shorter, or your collar is neatly pressed or not. And sometimes it's not the exact size. Some people notice those things. If your mom is not very good at sewing, like it's a little slightly different. And in second photographs, students look more relaxed. And then with a different overcoat or jacket, they added styling to their school outfit. The classmates would identify who's who based on their gestures or smiles. In the third photographs, you can see a humorous or illicit circumstance. High school students are gathering underneath the tobacco sign, like here, the tobacco sign, perhaps outside a general store. One can add styling by opening the top button, folding the sleeves, or putting the head in the bag. So here, they are sort of not so neat in terms of their school outfit. So I want to show you again a series of photographs. This is all from the National Folk Museum. So this is uniform pattern for high school. It's like sort of a Chanel 1950s, like a hourglass silhouette, like you have a dart here to make a little narrow waist. And then this is winter jacket, and then you have sailor suit model. So it shows that how you put that two white lines like this. And then this is a girl's jacket for the summertime. And then what else do I have? Oh, so, and then you also have this kind of announcement of school uniform sales. This is probably 1970s. So it shows where you should go. You have two designated shops, Victory and then Kyunghee, and then it shows your price, and price is determined by what kind of textile you are going to use. So if you use synthetic fiber mixed with wool versus if you have a really pure wool, like a crepe, like here, it's almost double the price that you can see over here. So you have these, or another school. This is a commercial high school for girls in Seoul, 1974. And then again, there are like explanations, and the price difference is not about the size, it's like what kind of textile that you are using. So the point I wanted to make is, so if your family is wealthy and you choose a nice textile after wearing 3 years, it shows. And if you have what can I say? Time is running out, so I have to I have to go back. So the what did I want to say? So uniform design and hair. Okay, I moved it. Okay, so we can have a glimpse of the regulations on one's outfits and one's corporal appearances. Each school had a set of rules on uniform makers. You go to designated shops and uniform designs, hair length, fingernails, shoes, hats, and so also other things like socks and shoes, belts. So briefly, I didn't find any the Korean schools regulation page yet, but for example, fingernail, gloves, hair restraint, jewelry. So this is an example of dress code required for restaurant workers. But a list of regulations for Korean schools would not be very different. Haircut had a designated length. Below 1 to 3 centimeters. The fingernails should be cut short. Teachers inspected fingernails, hair length, inside the collar for cleanness. So do you know this comics called 오달자's Spring? So I want you to read this, it's interesting. So this one is sort of a dean of student. So he came in and then, he's checking the appearances of these girls. So 오달자 is in that class. And then see girls all have the haircut short right above their ears or something. And then he noticed the one somewhere, and then he says, you have to lock the door, otherwise students will sneak out. And then this girl is a victim. So he literally put the model, and then he cut the hair. It's comical, but there is a reason that I am bringing up. So As the comics entitled 오달짜's Spring run from 1981 to 1984, the violation on a student body autonomy is comical yet brutal. The invasion of privacy is constant and forceful in the school community. Foucault's panopticon society was manifest in schools. Although the comics depicted this violation of body autonomy in a humorous way, one can imagine the humiliation or the embarrassment leading to the self-hatred or the resistance toward the establishment. It is the same pretext of respecting a community's regulation or a public decorum, in which promiscuously dressed women are blamed for inviting sexual assaults, or they were criticized for corrupting the morality of society. A discourse on public hygiene and women's reproductive rights is another contentious area that is related to body autonomy. Students subject to authoritarian regulations on appearance and dress code had to put up with the nation's other demands, such as male and female sterilization surgeries, offered as an effective family planning method throughout the 70s. Although they were called voluntary, the robust scale of surgeries from 60 to 84, encouraged by apartment ownership opportunities in the 70s, implies violation of privacy and body autonomy on some populations. So I want to show you a next series of images. So this is a pattern book owned by a woman, and it's probably from the 70s. And you can see the pattern of a basic, woman's blouse, and then shirt, and then more like a shirt. And then she has a little bit of recipe here written. Anyhow, this notebook belongs to a woman from the 1970s. She wrote recipes and garments patterns. To some people, this may look like a professional trainee's note, but educated mothers, so-called wise mothers and good wives, 현모양처, should be capable of this basic skill. If someone cannot mend the uniform pants or skirt hems, the image of impeccably dressed mother student is difficult to maintain. In a well-to-do household, a mother would work together with a domestic helper, or an incompetent mother would hire a seamstress to work on them. Poorly dressed students may give an impression on teachers and peers that they do not get proper care at home. Those dressed in professionally tailored uniforms in high quality imported textiles would have made a great impression on the community. So changes in school uniforms are related to the military dictatorship from the May 16 military uniform coup d'etat. But I'm going to skip this because almost the time is running out. So eventually, 1982, there was a there was a lift of a ban on hairstyles, so 두발 자율화. 1983, there was a new policy that giving autonomy for school uniforms, 교복 자율화. But then by 1991, many middle and high schools, more than 50% went back to school uniforms. So I want to show you this series of events. So this is 1971 여학생 magazine, very popular magazine. So girls all belong to certain schools. So it's slightly different, but basically the same style. And then hairstyle is also different by each school. This school had a little hat. So that is 1971, but eventually there won't be any school. But going back to now, today's conclusion, like a new Korean wave. So this is another version of sailor suits, right? Sailor suits, very short. It's not school. It's not meant to be school uniforms. But what I'm saying is, in popular culture, like school uniforms are transformed into a fancy style now, and we have. Like this, do you recognize who they are? These are called school looks, and then this is elite. So now we have only a few large companies. So the entire ensemble is about $300 or more. So, you know, like a 1966 science fair, like a girl, maybe very smart girls in that pants and jacket, but versus this stylish, like a fashionable. And then Ivy Club is another large conglomerate of school uniforms. And you can see, you cannot believe that these are school uniforms, right? But these are school uniforms, or you can go pastel color jackets like this. And then it says, do you read this? 다리가 길어 보이는 학생복. Like, so now it's more into your look. So, you know, our design makes your leg longer. It makes, you know, no, look, you know, like your legs look longer. And then Smart is another brand. So this is the popular actor as a model. And then this is BTS. It's one of their early advertisement deals when they were not super famous. So let me go back to my reading. So students have less regulations on hairs, socks, fingernails, makeup, shoes, sneakers, or layering choices, including winter jackets. Some schools use school uniforms to create their brands, as shown in high school in Yongin. Like this, the very fancy one on the left side. This is Yongin. It's elite school with a special admissions test, and it's designed by Andre Kim. Or that another really elite school called the Minjok Sagwan High School. They intentionally chose this. So there is a wide range of school uniforms. It seems like we have a more choices, but as a sociologist Choi Kyunghee mentioned in her observation of youth fashion in Seoul after 1990s, students cared much about the fit and style of their uniform by rolling up the waist of their skirt to make it shorter, or by altering the pants to make them wider and looser. Variations of style in uniforms determined by the region or the subculture have been clearly observed by wearers and observers. More and more companies have been adopting a dress code rather than a formal uniform policy. I may call this micro styling. At a casual look, students look alike in the same color, same shape uniforms. However, among the wearers themselves, they develop a highly sensitive perception of each other's differences and also evaluate whose look is superior to others. There are a variety of styling options with or without fashionable accessories of socks, backpacks, belts, hats, cardigans, and so on. As these value-added judgments or discernments become more rehearsed and repeated in daily encounters, observers tend to pay enormous attention to minuscule differences and thus create grounds for discrimination. If middle-class citizens in American urban towns, as observed by Goffman, exercised a highly sophisticated set of agencies to make an impression on or to read an impression from students in school uniforms in South Korea, were not passive learners of state-given conformity. In the current economic environment where social mobility is becoming more and more unlikely, as opposed to 1970s, students raised in school uniforms constantly compare themselves pairs in their body images and economic prosperity. With consciously or unconsciously ingrained psychological behavior, students grow up yearning for corrected body types or facial features in tune with standardized assumption of beauty, while which also undergo changes along the trends cultivated or manipulated by beauty industry. School-based violence in youth subcultures became only intensified despite the school uniform policy steadfast in all the schools. I argue that these students become workers who take workplace uniforms for granted in order to accommodate new sets of rules and values represented by their company logos and uniform designs. So that's the end. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the show, and then discard, and then
Maybe stop sharing. Yeah.
stop sharing. Yeah, hold on, I am going there. Okay, thank you so much
Perfect.
for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes for questions, and the usual way we do this is we ask people to put their questions into the chat, and then I kind of feed them to the speaker. So I've already got one message in the chat, which I'll share with you all, which is from Hyunjung Han. Says, very nice to virtually meet all of you. I'm a curator of Korean art at the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. So thank you very much for joining us. She says, thanks for the lecture, Kyunghee. I enjoyed it. If I may, I would like to introduce artworks by a notable contemporary artist, Toho-sa, it's Romanized, so I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, which are a bit related to today's subject, like imposed identities or demolishing identities by uniforms. So this Toho-sa has been interested in how uniforms can form, control, or force group identities over individuals. There we go, thank you. So there's some images right there, especially in the 1980s. 3 of his works are included in the upcoming exhibition at the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco, which is called Likeness and Legacy in Korean Portraiture, opening late August this year. She says, we hope that the pandemic is over by that time and you can all fly down to see these along with other Chosun Dynasty portraits. So more of a kind of comment and an FYI than a question, but thank you for sharing that. If we could go, I can't see the chat now if you're sharing. No, here we go. Got it. Go ahead.
Anyhow, thank you so much for Hyunjung's comment. And I am looking forward to that exhibition, the portraiture. And yes, Toho is a very important artist who talk about his personal journey through uniforms, right? Like I could not get the picture just showing this work, but you can see that kindergarten, right? Elementary school and middle school, high school. And if you go to high school, what happens? You have to go through military training. So in the high school, you have several, and then that does not end there. You go to you actually go to the military service. Then, Korean men have that 2 years or so, military uniform period. And then it's not it. Like after you finish the military service, you are on the Army Reserve, right? So you go to yearly annual training. And then at the end, I think this is more like a suit jacket. So, if you work for the company, that's your end of life. So my 39 years, uniforms, self-portraits, my 39 years.
Okay, there's another question from our colleague Millie Creighton. She says, I have 2 questions following up on your 3 images of students on field trips. So the first question is, were there rules, she says rules in scare quotes, about students wearing the uniforms on such field trips and how to act in going to or from school, for example, in public commuting? That's the first question.
Not on field trips, Ross, but just in commuting to and from the school.
Okay, thank you. Well then, since you're right there and since we're a small group, you could probably just go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, anyhow, so I am, I am going to answer those questions. The commute is a very important part. Before the school, during the period when each elite school had their admissions test, it's your choice, right? If you want to go to the top school, it is like a 1 hour bus ride, but you will still go to that school on a bus. Or people coming from the provinces, if let's say if you get into Kyunghee, then people will get a boarding house near the school, and then you probably walk like a short distance. But the neighborhood setting is important because if you are familiar with it, like Cheongdong, in the middle of the Seoul near the city hall, there were always clusters of school like Ihwa, like a high school, or even Baeje, school, or clusters of schools. So in it, because you have 3-4 schools clustered together, people really pay a lot of attention the way you dressed your school uniforms, or how you, let's say, embody the school's image in you. But if you go to school in Yeongdeungpo, for example, are you familiar with the Yeongdeungpo, like in the Seoul's west side? So that is predominantly manufacturing neighborhood. So there, from the Japanese colonial period, there were many factories, and in 1960s and 70s, like export-driven economy, all those factories had their own high schools. It's like a night high schools. You work during the daytime, you go to school at night. So in the Yeongdeungpo area, like so it's very far from Kyunghee or all these like famous schools, but in that area, people are really judged on your school uniforms, and in that community, it's more like a sense of deprivement, or a little bit of I would not say like a humiliation, but if you read like novels by Shin Kyung-suk, right, like Take Care of Your Mom, all those novels, you really see that night school students, they didn't have like a high image, like of their own like a school uniform, like their identity, right? Their corporate identity. But they were lucky ones if they go to the Yeouido Girls High School night class. If you go there, it's still lucky. If you have a bad employers, then you don't go to school at all. Then you just wear that workers uniform, all day long, and no school at all. So there are certain sense of like a pride versus how do you call it? I would not say humiliation. Like sometimes like a shame. I mean, if you wanted to go to that top tier elite school, but you didn't do very well in the admission test, and you somehow ended up going to a third tier school, then your self confidence, goes down, and then especially in that particular commute route, like a 20-minute bus ride, you have some mixture of different school students, and like your images are again created by those experiences. You have a lot of accounts of those memoirs or descriptions in novels.
I think in part, I'm asking, you mentioned, okay, so when they're at this museum, they're told they have to behave well because they represent the school. So when students are not at school, but are wearing the uniform, like while they're commuting or in the neighborhood, like, are they also indoctrinated about how they are supposed to behave because they have the school uniform on?
So in theory, you have to, comply with regulations, but you are like a dean of students is not chasing after you right outside the school gate. So you have a little bit more freedom. So, like even during the Japanese peer colonized period, you have a lot of accounts of students are engaged in illicit behavior in school uniforms, and they also alter school uniforms. It's obvious, everybody knows it's still school uniforms, but again, you are styling a little bit more in a way, so that you can put like a sort of a safe pins somewhere here so that your jacket is a little bit, more tailored. Or it's very common that just like a Catholic girls' uniforms, students want to have a skirt short so that they wrap up a few times, or men, they know that they want to show a little bit of like their forearms, right? Like so they fold up, they put like a school uniforms up. So there are a lot of sort of a alterate, like a styling. That's what I mean calling like by styling. So yes, like if you are very good student, abide by those compliances, they will still keep the behavior. So that's what you are seeing in these students in the art exhibition. So this is a part of, I think, school official trips. But if you go to the next one, like here, they are probably older, like a high school students. And then these kind of field trips, you show up on your own. And then it was allowed to have some sort of jacket or overcoats, even though it's a school organized field trips. So there are some exceptions. Or schools also go to science fairs, right? Like other, like a remote excursions, so that you can see a little bit more styling choices those days.
And Millie had a follow-up question there. Were the attitudes stricter towards girls in terms of, how they were supposed to behave or when they're in uniform?
You showed the 3 photos, and the first one, they're behaving more as they're supposed to. Then the second and third, they're getting farther and farther away from the rules, but those are also all male students. So I'm wondering if this pressure was stronger on female students.
So even, like among female students, there are also some variations of behavior. So, near the Kyunghee Girls High School, there is also a school called the Pyun Girls High School. So Pyun was known for relaxed behavior. Like, so they are not as uptight as the Kyunghee girls, where everybody complies with the rules. And then the Pyun Girls High School, even though it's the same neighborhood, you will see that girls are more inventive in doing a little, little thing, like just to give a little twist to their boring school uniforms. So in many times, if students, look at these girls' legs, before that nylon stockings were invented, like the 1960s, even though it's cold, it's still bare legs. And you have that socks. Again, socks is also, stipulated by the rule book. So it should be folded, let's say, a few times, by the ankle. But 1960s, still that knitted socks, kind of, cotton knitwear, the quality is not really good. So those who have imported socks have a very nice, ankle, versus people who have sort of a worn out socks, then it's sort of loose. And then later on, I actually had a lot of interviews with people. So 70s, late 60s, people have that nylon stockings. And nylon stockings, as you remember, there was a line, right? And at the back, right? Calf, there was a line, old fashioned nylon stockings. So that it should be right in the middle. And then if it's twisted or crooked, then that's also a sign of sloppiness. So they keep fixing it. And especially before entering school, there's always a couple of inspectors, usually the seniors, watching your behavior. And you don't want to be pointed out, or they have like a mark books. They really check. Boys probably had a wide ranges of behavior, but girls, depending on the school settings, they also had a little illicit or inventive behaviors.
Here's a question from Malia Belly Both. She says, what a fascinating talk. Thank you. My question is tangential. You mentioned, I guess, Pungso in passing.
Mm-hmm.
They remind me of British colonial company paintings and photographs. Is there any connection?
Yes. I mean, I'm originally art historian, so we have, that genre of photography and painting made for tourist interest, or it's sometimes called export painting. So like Orientalist painting for, British colonies, people visiting Korea, especially Japanese tourists visiting Korea during the colonial period, they want to buy something exotic, right? Like as a souvenir. So for those people, if you go to the Mitsukoshi department store, or we had like a 3-4 department stores in Seoul, you can buy those. It's folk painting. So in it, usually you will see people working in the field with a cow, right? Somebody making baskets, sort of exotic and less industrial, those kind of behavior. What the point I wanted to make is, people, those are people who are attending elite educational institutions, they are aware of those images. When it's not even Korea, like what Chosen, people meant to Japanese colonizers, and they were very conscious of eradicating those associations. So they were impeccably dressed as required by their authority.
Okay, any other questions? There's nothing in the chat at the moment, but people can jump in. It's a small group.
So I didn't talk so much about my next project, but so I am currently writing school uniforms in East Asia. So this talk is a little part of it. But after that project is over, I want to write about workplace uniforms. And to me, especially, working with my students at Fashion Institute of Technology for so many years, I'm very interested in this, representation of self in workplace or dress code. So food industry was one example, right? Like we all take it for granted that workers should have a strict dress code because it's about food, right? It's about hygiene. And you would expect the same thing for your doctors and nurses, right? Because it's a medical conditions. But why on earth bank tellers should wear uniforms? It's not about the food safety. It's not about your medical, well-being. Originally, this is again from the Japanese colonial legacy. So these tellers, they cannot fully trusted, right? Like the reason they are putting on this uniform is that reason. What if they sneak in some money in, or if you have a pocket, like 5 of them inside, what can you do? Like, so here, just like a factory workers, a sense of, like a strict supervision. And what is really strange is men, they don't have to wear uniforms. You never seen male teller in a uniforms, right? It's always women. And in Korean tradition, just like Japan, because of those patriarchal tradition, we have this word called 여직원, right? Like a woman employee, like a female employee. And when you say female employee, it's like a separate track. You never go to the managerial positions, right? And most you will be a supervisor of these ladies, but you will never go to in that line. And behind it, we have income gaps. They will never, attain those wages. So workplace uniforms is actually a bigger problem. My own friends, when they got a job at a conglomerate in 1990s, because they have a fancy, like college education, they were in the same group with these men. They can be executive positions, but these women, like the female employees who are in the sort of a uniformed female employees, were quite mad at my generation of friends who got a job, sort of executive position jobs in large companies. So it is really problematic. Do you recognize what this building is? This is Amore Pacific building headquarters in Yongsan. It's really beautiful building. And here they are receptionists, but they again wear the same outfit, gray. I mean, it's a very nice design. And then just like what is it, like a flight attendant, same hairstyle. What I'm arguing is if you are exposed to this kind of scrutinizing environment, what happens is you really want to have your physical part altered. There is no way of showing your own individuality. I mean, again, there is a subtle micro-styling part, but at this level, like a professional, like a work environment, again, if you start to compare yourself to the peers and so forth, same in like a plastic surgery clinics, like beauty industries, if you require those kind of uniforms, people then end up spending money on makeups. Then the next step will be physical alteration of your parts. So it's a brutal cycle. I mean, that's my argument. You know, like a bodily autonomy versus corporate discipline, people are so accustomed to corporate discipline from school age and so forth, and historically from the colonial period and so forth, so that they take it for granted. But you have to say no to dress code, because it's not essential. It's not about your job performance. So that's what we talk with my students in FIT. And American companies are not the exception either. Fashion companies especially, they have a strict dress code. And when you go for job interviews, they only choose people with the physical characteristics that fit their brand image. So people who don't fit the brand image, you should not even apply. But you want to work for Vera Wang, right? Or you want to work for Philip Lim, for example. So I have a lot of data of those unofficial dress code that I hear from students. But you all fit it, right? Like if you work for Bank A versus Bank B, I don't know about Canada, but in New York, place like New York, you somehow learn it. It's very conscious. So you have to wear a certain way in order to work for L'Oreal. And if you want to work for Estee Lauder, another cosmetic company, you have to wear like that way, but you learn it. So a lot of brands, but Korean people are so talented in creating things, right? So this is a company called San, S-A-N, and they create custom-made workplace uniforms. So when I call uniforms, it's not boring and ugly. They are so stylish and fancy. You can also now, you know, dictate the type, the high quality textiles as well. So like one company that I did some research, this Sun is a large company, and they also work with that, you know, Paris Baguette, if you ever go to Korea, you know, or the Amore Pacific too, you know, like those like large companies. So basically their idea was, we design your brand so that if you have such a logo or, you know, brand and a corporate, you know, identity, then the employees will follow those lines. So that's my next project.
Kyunghee, I'm gonna have to move us from corporal discipline to temporal discipline, because we're at 20, we're at 20 past now. No, but I just want to make sure there's not, if there's any last question, because otherwise I think we should wrap it up. We usually don't go past 6:20 or so. But is there anybody else that has a question they would like to ask? Because now is the time. Either in chat or just turn off your mute. If we don't, you know, have any more questions, I think we should wrap things up and thank everybody for coming. It's been very interesting. So going once, going okay, the people there, I see that the applause is already coming in, so I think that we're going to stop it there. But thank you very much, Professor Pyun. Very interesting indeed. This is going to be a book, right?
Yes, not all of this part, but, you know, certainly like the colonial period, you know, development will be part of my book. And then, yeah, I'm doing research for Taiwan. Taiwan is a very interesting case, right? It's not like a Korea where they want to insulate it from the past. Like a Taiwan is actually inviting their, you know, Japanese connections these days. And then China, it is a whole another issue. You know, China is big and coastal cities are very different from the inner cities. But there are a lot of old photographs. A lot of them are digitized now. So that's what I am discovering during my research.
Oh, yeah, excellent. Okay, well,
Anyhow,
I think
thank you so much.
everybody looks forward to that. Thank you once again, and thank you all for coming.
Okay,
All right.
bye everybody.
And